broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's edition of WilmsFront on this Wednesday, the 9th of November 2020. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube and DLive channels. No entropy software again tonight. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria, where with 16 more sleeps until Christmas, we have now entered what Dan Andrews has called a COVID-safe summer. It's not the COVID normal that he promised us in his initial roadmap out of lockdown on September 6th, which was Father's Day, when we were still in stage 4 lockdown. So after 28 days of no community transmission and no active cases, we're supposed to have no restrictions on gatherings or anything. There would only be surveillance of our movements by being forced to check in everywhere for contact tracing purposes. We have now gone 40 days without community transmission and we have 0 active cases. Of course, the surveillance is still there, whether it be the paper sign-in whenever you go to a hospitality venue or the QR code digital check-in system. And there is, of course, still a long list of restrictions and gathering limits. 30 people per day are allowed to visit your private home. 100 people can gather in public, and now all hospitality operates under the 1 person per 2 square meter rule. And also dancing is now allowed again in Victorian nightclubs and weddings, with 50 people allowed on the dance floor. Masks are now only required in public transport, commercial passenger vehicles like taxis and Uber, supermarkets, department stores and shopping centres, though you still have to carry a mask with you at all times, otherwise you risk a $200 fine. I don't know how's that supposed to be enforced. What Victoria Police going to stop you when you're going out for a walk in the park and say empty your pockets to see if there's a mask in there, and if there's not, they'll give you a $200 fine. Of course, you all know my views on masks. They don't work. They have probably the most marginal use in containing droplets or stopping transmission. It should have always been voluntary to wear one, and they're now especially stupid that they're still mandatory in some settings, given that there is no COVID in the Victorian community and no other state or territory mandates masks in any settings. If you go out and about in Melbourne, you'll still see people outside wearing their cultural masks, as Dan termed them. The good news, though, is all state and territory borders are now open with each other. The exception is Victoria still has its hard border to South Australia, which I don't know why that is, given that South Australia has now well and truly ended its community transmission from its hotel quarantine outbreak back in mid-November. I assume that the hard border is just there between Victoria and South Australia out of spite, given that South Australia had that hard border with Victoria during our second wave. And of course, Western Australia being the hardest state when it comes to elimination and shutting down borders, still has its hard border with South Australia. Although as of midnight on Mondays, or from Tuesday the 8th, Victorian and New South Wales people can now go to Western Australia without having to quarantine. Though I did hear that if you have already done, say, 5 days in quarantine in Western Australia, if you travel from Victoria and New South Wales before the 8th of December, you've still got to do your 14 days, even though if people from those states came to Western Australia now, they'd be able to enter the state freely. So there you go. The contradictions and draconian measures continue. So the only place in Victoria, or the rest of Australia for that matter, where COVID will still be found is from return travellers in hotel quarantine. Victoria's hotel quarantine program resumed this Monday, the 7th. The new minister in charge of hotel quarantine is Police Minister Lisa Neville. There is now a dedicated hotel quarantine agency called COVID-19 Quarantine Victoria. Lisa Neville has been on a publicity blitz this week to reassure the Victorian public that this is a whole reset of the program. Yes, that's the terminology that the Andrews government has been using, reset, which, of course, Victoria's hotel quarantine program in its first incarnation is where the virus escaped to create the state's second wave, which 801 Victorians died with COVID, and led to the 4-month police state lockdown. Though there has already been one major stuff up with the reset of the hotel quarantine program, is that the Andrews government have discovered that they needed to pass legislation to charge return travellers $3,000 for their 14-day hotel quarantine stay. So that's what they've done this week. But again, that doesn't really fill you with confidence. We forgot to pass legislation to actually charge people for the hotels they're staying in. There are no private security guards being used this time in Victoria's hotel quarantine. So Victoria Police will be guarding the quarantine hotels, with Australian Defence Force personnel helping with logistics, like transporting return travellers from the airports to the hotels. As I predicted, on Monday morning, all the television cameras were out at Melbourne Airport to see the return travellers getting off the tarmac and then onto the sky buses into Melbourne. So there is a lot more scrutiny on the program this time. As of tonight, no return travellers have tested positive, but 6 are apparently displaying symptoms and have been transferred to the designated hot hotel at the Novotel in South Wharf, which is just below the Yarra River from Docklands and Southern Cross Station. Well, Australians being relatively free to enjoy the festive season, assisted by the fact that it's summer down here and the virus has been eliminated. That's sadly not the case for Westerners in the Northern Hemisphere, where they are in the grip of their dark winter. Governments are threatening to place severe restrictions on family gatherings for Christmas, deeming them that if you spend the holiday period with your loved ones, then you're engaging in super spreader events. This is why the UK government has approved and is now administering the Pfizer BioNTech mRNA coronavirus vaccine. They're selling it to the public that if you want to get back to normal, you want the old normal back, your old life, international travel, then taking the jab is the only way. The first jabs were administered for the cameras last night, and in the coming weeks, the Queen and Prince Philip will take the jab in an effort to show the British public that the vaccine is safe. I wonder if there'll be how there's a lot of public affairs channels where they display Parliament and other public events. Sky News at the moment, Australia, has their Sky News COVID-19 channel. I wonder if they'll change it to COVID Vax channel, where it'll just be high-profile people getting the coronavirus vaccines for the cameras. It'll be like a new type of reality TV, watching everyone get the vaccine. Some good news: the weekend's Freedom Days across Australia. There was a National Freedom Day on Sunday, and then there was a separate another Melbourne one, I should say, on the Saturday as well, Freedom Day. So there were 2 in Melbourne, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. They were 100% peaceful, the Melbourne ones, because the police finally stood back and did not arrest, kettle or manhandle any of the attendees. Police deciding not to I should say, police deciding to intervene in the protest was the only way. They were not going to be peaceful, even though masks at that time had been relaxed outdoors. Victoria Police were still out there with their masks and their gloves on in the scorching heat, watching the anti-lockdown, pro-freedom protests, and even the mainstream media who were covering it decided would wear their masks for the day. Throughout the entirety of 2020, Dan Andrews has expressed his dislike of protesters against his government. That is why Victoria Police did not take any action against the people assembling for the Black Lives Matter rallies in June, despite there being gathering limits of 20 at the time. Didn't charge the organisers with incitement, although they did fine the organisers the $1,652 breach of the Chief Health Officer's directions fines. But with Victoria set to live under a state of emergency until at least March 2021, when Dan Andrews' state of emergency extension expires, Chief Health Officer Dr. Brett Sutton has confirmed that the Andrews government is looking at developing a permit system for public protests and demonstrations. That if you want to protest, you'll have to apply to the authorities for a permit. I wonder which protests are more likely to be approved by Dan Andrews. And obviously, we've seen Dan chastise all the anti-lockdown protests throughout the year, and it's clear that he doesn't want any more protests. He doesn't like protests and wishes they weren't to continue, even though Assistant Victoria Police Commissioner Luke Cornelius, aka Chief Wiggum, did concede that protesting was a fundamental human right. And also freedom of assembly is mentioned in Victoria's Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities 2006, which was passed by the Labor Bracks government, which Daniel Andrews would have voted for. But that was back when the left actually cared about human rights, or pretended to care about human rights, given that Dan Andrews seems to think that China is our greatest ally now. Because he's still gung-ho on the Chinese One Belt, One Road program, even though the Morrison government passed the Foreign Relations Bill this week, allowing them to veto such agreements. But it's clear now that Dan is aligned not just with China economically, but also when it comes to human rights as well, because, well, not allowed to protest in China at all. Also, the Andrews government is still determined to extract payments from all those who were fined during the coronavirus lockdowns, which stand at a total of 30 million. So there was initially the standard 1,652 penalty infringement notices that if you breached the chief health officer's directions, you were given that notice by the police. Then, of course, the $200 mask fine, and then there was the $4,957 fine during the state of disaster if you broke a quarantine, or if you held an illegal party, picnic, or protest. Greens MP for Brunswick, Tim Reid, he asked the Victorian Attorney General, Jill Hennessy, to waive fines issued to those who are under 18, which total $3 million. Many of these coronavirus fines were issued to low-income and vulnerable groups, including those from non-English speaking backgrounds who didn't quite understand the restrictions. And of course, Victoria Police had the ability to use discretion when issuing coronavirus infringement notices, which means there are even more inconsistencies with the application of these coronavirus rules. Given the determination of the Andrews government to collect these fines, with only 5% of them paid, you can smell another robo-debt style program being rolled out, this time by the Victorian Labor government to harass vulnerable groups for their payment. And of course, we never had a public health response to the coronavirus. It was always a police state response right from the beginning, with as soon as Dan Andrews first implemented the first stay-at-home orders on March the 31st, said Victoria Police will be out enforcing these orders, will punish you if you break them. We've always had the highest fines for infringement, with $1,652, and apparently the 30 million total value of fines given out during Victoria's 2 lockdowns is actually more than the Russian government's dished out to its citizens for breaching that nation's coronavirus lockdown. Hello to everyone in the chat. Please say hello. Now, as I mentioned, that entropy is not working tonight, so if you've got a question, please tag me in the live chat there, because it'll show up in red there. Hello, Anita. Hello, Pissy Leaks Pete. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, we are in the southern hemisphere summer now, and it's shaping up to be the perfect summer here, because obviously last summer, the summer of 1920 in Australia, was dominated by the Black Summer bushfires across the east coast of Australia, which were particularly bad on the south coast of New South Wales, where the recovery is still still underway, and there's still many people who've been displaced from their homes. But you remember back in that pre-COVID time, the climate apocalypse was that was the biggest threat to humankind, and we had Greta Thunberg during 2019 doing a globalist tour, and they were all pointing to Australia's Black Summer as proof of the coming climate apocalypse. And there was fake news that was circulated all around the globe that Australia was on fire and you wouldn't want to visit it because it's all being destroyed, which obviously the fires they were devastating to the areas they affected, but also what allowed this fake news to circulate was the fact that the smoke made it to the Melbourne Metro and Sydney Metro regions there, and so they were able to circulate all of the images of Hazefield, Sydney and Melbourne. Then there are a lot of fake images of trying to show the whole of Australia was on fire. And then, of course, that was probably that time was probably the low point for Scott Morrison's prime ministership, when he was holidaying in Hawaii when the fires were underway, and his office wouldn't confirm that he was there, and he eventually was forced to come back. But Morrison said, a lot of political commentators believe that he's bounced back with his coronavirus response throughout 2020. Of course, I've said it before, if you ask me, that Scott Morrison through the National Cabinet has just let the states and territories run roughshod through the Constitution, and Scott, with regard to federation and freedom of movement between the states, and Scott Morrison and his government have done stuff all with regard to that. But yes, what a difference a year makes. And the only major bushfire at the moment is on Fraser Island in southeast Queensland, which has actually been going for 6 weeks, believe it or not. It actually started before the Queensland election was held, which a lot of people are thinking, has there been some sort of cover-up, given that the media have been denied access to it? And you wonder what is the re-elected Anastasia Palaszczuk Labor government covering up there? Speaking of state governments, the Victorian state government lost its AAA credit rating. We're now AA, but so did New South Wales, but they're AA plus. Imagine my shock that 2 lockdowns and a state budget, which basically in Victoria, which expands the apparatus of the state, would lead to a credit downslide here in Victoria. It's the first time we've lost it since 1998. Oh, well, it was regained, regained the state's AAA credit rating in 1998 when Jeff Kennett fixed up the Labor mess of 30 years ago, because in 1990, thanks to the John Kerner government, Victoria was on the verge of bankruptcy with the collapse of the state bank, the Pyramid Building Society. Yes, that was its name, Pyramid. And so we have the same state disaster happening 30 years later. So I've made the reference that every 30 years in Victoria, they're just like Pennywise, the clown in It, terrifying children. We have this terrifying Labor clown government every 30 years. So we had one in 1990, and we're having another one here in 2020. Now, obviously, this summer is shaping up to be perfect, with perfect weather and no bushfires. But of course, we don't know what the autumn and winter of 2021 will bring. I've constantly referred to the 2020-2021 summer escape window, that if you're a person who has the means to relocate from Victoria, now's the best time to do it, because you don't know what Dan Andrews is going to do during 2021, when obviously there'll be more, flu-like viruses will return during the cold Melbourne winter, and you don't know what he's going to do during that time. And we're going to have a lockdown every winter, because you look back at the up at the dark winter in the northern hemisphere, the UK and the US were open during the northern hemisphere summer, but have all re-shut down during the winter there. And obviously with Joe Biden on the cups of being president-elect Joe Biden, the Electoral College meets in about a week. He's not president-elect yet, despite the fact that the media referring to him that. The Electoral College has to actually meet first once all the states have certified their results. The Electoral College electors meet in Washington to elect the new president, and then that is rubber stamped by the new Congress on January the 6th. And of course, Inauguration Day is on January 20th. And we know that Joe Biden, he's softened his position that there won't be national lockdown, but though he wants all Americans to wear their mask for the first 100 days of his presidency, because there's some bogus statistic that apparently if everyone wears a mask, it'll save 100 to 200,000 lives. I don't know where they pulled that figure on. But yes, we know that just like Dan Andrews, Joe Biden is a massive mask fetishist. He's given media appearances with his mask on, trying to speak through. And it's a common thing in the US for these Democrat politicians and even rhino Republicans to give press conferences with their masks on. Even Dan Andrews and his ministers haven't given press conferences with their mask on. I think the only Australian politician who's given interviews with her mask on is Melbourne Lord Mayor Sally Capp, who got re-elected in a landslide during Victoria's local government elections of 2020. And Nicholas Rees, a Sky News personality and Labour apologist, was elected Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne. So certainly people in charge of the city of Melbourne, you could say, even though they're not total allies of Dan Andrews, they're certainly at one. I saw Nicholas Rees on Sky News last night cheering on the Andrews government going after the non-fine payers. He has been an apologist for Dan Andrews' police state all the way through, and we're seeing, as I've said, in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly the UK, the Melbourne model, being locked out with the police over there violently suppressing anti-lockdown protests over there, which of course the police in the UK, they actually ran away from Black Lives Matter mobs. And you remember in the UK that the Black Lives Matter mobs, they tore down statues and threw them in the river. Our relationship with Australia's trading relationship, as you say, with China, we've been hit with more trade sanctions, this time against some beef and also Australian timber as well. And of course, China had the new theory this week that the coronavirus was born in Australian beef. They've previously blamed the US and Italy, pretty much blamed everyone else except their own country. Even though the first place the virus was discovered was in Wuhan, China, came from bat coronavirus, and they did have bats to eat in Wuhan. But of course, remember that it's controversial to say that it came from bat soup in Wuhan or the bioweapons lab just outside of Wuhan as well. So you'll get fact checked or blocked for that on social media, but you're allowed to. Well, the Chinese authorities are allowed to spread these other unfounded allegations that the coronavirus started somewhere else. Though, as I mentioned, despite China's constantly hitting us with trade sanctions, Dan Andrews, well, he's the only state government that has signed this Belt and Road thing. He thinks it's so important, this agreement, and that it's up to the federal government to repair the damage. But it is interesting that no other state or territory government feels the need to sign up to this One Belt, One Road program. Could be the fact that the Victorian state government is projected to have the most debt out of all the state and territory governments, with it to hit 155 billion by 2024. Now it's approaching 5:30, so I'm joined by my guest for tonight, which is Kyle Kutasi, who is the president of the H.R. Nichols Society, a lawyer by trade, and as you would have seen during his last appearance on the show, can rant about everything. I'll bring Kyle in now.
Hey, Tim, how you going?
I'm going better since the last time that we spoke, because we're still in a form of lockdown here in Melbourne.
Yeah. Well, we all still are to some extent, aren't we?
Oh, well, we still have we're the only state and territory, as I told my audience before, with the mask mandate in some settings. We've got to carry a mask with us at all times in our pocket, according to Dan. I know you have your problems with New South Wales current restrictions, but at least they get Gladys Berejiklian gets the gold star for being the least worst premier when it comes to lockdowns and rules.
Admittedly, very low bar, Tim.
I know it's a low bar, but it's where we'd all rather be in New South Wales.
Well, you should rather be in New South Wales for a whole range of reasons, not just our lockdown rules. We are the premier state, after all. I just chuck in a little joke there, mate. It's but I understand the point you're making. Yeah. Without going back over the old ground again, from when when did we last talk? It was about 2 months ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, we're still no closer to any of this being finished, except for the potentially the vaccine then being the circuit breaker, and let's not get started then on topic of that, of, what happens then? Does everyone have to take it? Do you have to take it to travel? Do you have to take it to go to school? Even though no children have died from this, whatever, it's just an endless regression where politicians can't accept that they got it wrong in the first place in March. So they just double down and triple down and quadruple down on it,
Well, as we approach the end of 2020, the Morrison government seems to be patting itself on the back now to say, look, we're in this excellent position where, or they would never say the virus is eliminated, because don't forget, we've had a suppression strategy. It's never been about elimination.
Well, I keep saying to people, say, look, it's succeeded. So what, are you never going to open the border again? What's the long-term alternative? Do we have to stay in? Does everyone who travels quarantine for the next century? Surely not. And then I think I said it on the last program with you, Tim, and still no one's been able to answer this for me. Why don't we force people into quarantine when they come or from places that have an incidence of tuberculosis? There's a strain of TB that cannot be cured with penicillin. It circulates in our community. We were once a country that had no tuberculosis. You can catch it now on the streets of Sydney or Melbourne because people will come in the country with it. Kills far more people than have ever killed COVID, and no one cares.
Don't give the federal government any further ideas. That's a bad suggestion.
I'm not saying that they should be doing that. I'm just saying.
I know, but the golden rule is even though it's a hypothetical devil's advocate.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, don't give him an inch. I'll take it a mile. I know. It's disappointing. But go on, mate. You're going to say something.
Well, we're approaching the end of the parliamentary year, and we've had the Morrison government basically pat itself on the back with the GDP figures for the September quarter, 3.3% growth, and they've already got the slogan, "Our economic comeback," and they've got the website and the advertising campaign to put up at bus shelters or anything like that. $15 million apparently to tell us that everything's going to bounce back well.
And maybe it will to some degree. But I mean, there's always a long-term price to be paid for this stuff. We've covered the paper cracks with we've covered the cracks by papering over them with the welfare, the job seeker and the job keeper payments. That comes out of our taxes. They haven't cut expenditure at all in any way. They haven't said, oh, well, we have to pay more in JobKeeper and JobSeeker, therefore we need to take money out of health or education. They haven't done that. So it's going to come through either debt and or higher taxes. And that's going to have a long-term price to be paid. But, that's what politics is. The problem of politics is public choice theory, is the price paid today is usually very, very minor, whereas the price paid in the long term is not suffered by the politicians. So they do what benefits them in the short to medium term, not what benefits the country in the long term. And anyway, you could talk for hours on that topic.
Yeah, they've just whacked the cost of the shutdowns for the moment on the credit card, and as our federal debt is set to hit $1 trillion, and even at that stage, the debt apologists say, well, it's still not bad as other nations like the US and those nations like Greece and Cyprus and Italy and Japan, and the general public feel that it's not my debt, it's not on my credit card, so it's not going to affect me.
We're comparing our economy now to Cyprus as a yardstick. Is that, I mean,
that's what they do.
The Japanese comparison too is a bad one. I don't know if you've ever been to Japan, a lovely place. They have an extraordinarily aged population. The average Japanese woman's now having something like 0.5 children. We, by comparison, because of our higher immigration rates, have been able to keep the economy churning over. They've got a natural decline. The more people now die in Japan every year than are born in Japan. You can't compare the Australian economy to the Japanese economy. Not to say, by the way, that they're doing all that well by comparison. It's like comparing apples with oranges. You've got to compare us with similar like economies. The US is very similar to Australia. It's just a much bigger version of it in a way. There's parts of the US that have done relatively well. Look at Florida. But notably, Florida didn't have the same savage lockdowns that we had. Whereas other places like California have not done as well out of it, and they had savage and continue to have savage lockdowns.
Yes, it's been continuing in California, and Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, has been one of the few who, after the first wave, said, like, no, we're not going to live like this. Our hospital system can handle it, has a 99% recovery rate. We're staying open. I'm not going to be bullied and intimidated by the media or the health bureaucrats to lock down again. And it was pointed out to me by Tom Woods, who's a libertarian podcaster and also lives in Florida now. Given like if lockdowns are the only method of containing the virus, then by definition the corpses should be piling up in Florida, and while California and New York, they should have much lower death tolls.
Well, all the places that haven't had the lockdowns have had virtually no difference in their death rates. Sweden has been well and truly overtaken by pretty much every other country in Europe. Belarus never locked down and hasn't had the incidence of some of its neighbours. The various states within the United States, I mean, I think there's been virtually nothing in North and South Dakota, but they're sparsely populated places anyway. But most of sub-Saharan Africa, by the way, which never gets mentioned in any of this stuff whatsoever, has had virtually no incidence of COVID-19 at all. And there's a couple of reasons for why that is. The main one there is that they've got a very, very young population. They're also in tropical areas. And if there's two things that this virus has proven to us to date, it's that it doesn't seem to cope in people under the age of 70 very well, and it doesn't like warm weather. You would think that would have helped California to some degree. I mean, I know California's a big place. I know San Francisco's a lot cooler than San Diego, but anyway, as I said, we could, you can talk about this topic for years.
You've also made by making that point, you've also highlighted another important distinction that seems that's only the Western economies that have done these shutdowns. Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, I won't get too much into it. I have a fair bit to do with an African country, and they also went into lockdown, but not because they were suffering any incidents, merely because WHO paid the money to lock down. And that's another issue again, is multinational, international organizations that, impose leftism on people. But yeah, I mean, but in a country, let's take a country like Ethiopia. Ethiopia doesn't have a welfare system. So if you're going to impose a lockdown on Ethiopia, you effectively condemn those people to starvation, because there's no way that they can earn a living. There's no way that they can't, there's no grain handout, there's no dole. If you don't work, you die. It's as simple as that. And so they haven't imposed them. But guess what? They haven't really had the same level of incidents that we've had. Surprise, surprise.
Exactly. Now let's talk now about some of the post-COVID politics in Australia. We've had your area of expertise, industrial relations. That's flared up today with the Morrison government through Industrial Relations Minister Christian Porter wanting to introduce more flexibility in the workplace when it comes to casual work, and this is something that the ACTU hasn't liked. They particularly haven't liked the independent contractors. In fact, Dan Andrews has argued that the second wave was made worse by insecure work because people went to work sick because they needed the money, and he's got that pilot program of sick leave for casuals. Before I let you answer, I just want to make the point that the reason why insecure work was a problem during the lockdown is because it was the government that was imposing the lockdowns without compensation.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. I have had a look at the bill that was actually only tabled, I think, yesterday afternoon. Like all legislation that the coalition introduces, there's usually something of a sting in the tail. Unlike Labor, if Labor wants to pass laws that are broadly anti-employer, they just pass laws that are anti-employer. They don't give the employer any sort of leg up. The coalition has always felt that there needs to be some sort of trade-off. If they're going to do something for flexibility in the workplace, there needs to be some sort of security trade-off. Hence how we got the infamous work choices legislation in the first place. All they were trying to do was abolish unfair dismissal laws. And in the process, Kevin Andrews felt that, oh, well, if we abolish unfair dismissal laws, then we need to give protections on the other side and introduce what became the national employment standard. It was a Trojan horse. And of course, Labor ran with that and took it a million miles. You know, the old saying goes, only Nixon could go to China. Only Kevin Andrews could have introduced minimum standards in employment legislation in Australia. So we have to be careful in swallowing too much of a propaganda about this legislation that Christian Porter has introduced in the last 24 hours. Because whilst there are some positives that I've seen in there, one of the main, I'd say the two main things they're attempting to achieve is to make it easier for companies to make enterprise agreements. It is quite a laborious red tape process where a lot of employers just say, well, why bother? And that's to be commended. The other aspect of what they're trying to do as well is to give a definition of casual employment. So I don't know if you're aware, but there's currently, and it has been ever since I've been a practitioner for 15 years now, there's always been a great deal of uncertainty in advising clients whether someone is or isn't a casual employee. And you'll get, you can run a risk as an employer of employing someone for years sometimes, thinking that they are a casual employee. And then the person turns around after, say, 10, 20 years employment and says, well, actually, I was a full-timer or a permanent rather than full-timer. And therefore, you owe me 20 years worth of annual leave and long service leave and sick leave entitlements and public holiday pay, et cetera, et cetera. And they wound up in tens of thousands of dollars of litigation trying to defend those type of claims. And so it's, in one respect, introducing a hard, bright line rule test for what a casual employee is something that employers will appreciate. However, what they won't appreciate is that at the same time, the government has introduced a casual conversion clause. So there's an automatic provision now that an employee can request to become a permanent employee, and the employer can't basically refuse that except on certain limited grounds. Now, that probably doesn't sound like such a big deal. I used to be an employer group land through most of the late 2000s, early 2010s, And we spent years and years and years opposing those kind of clauses when the ACTU was trying to introduce them. And now the government comes along and just introduces them in legislation. That won't get any attention. The ACTU won't talk about that. The federal government won't talk about it. They won't say, look what we've done. It's just one of those nasty things that employers will get slugged with that they don't even realise are going to be there. The other thing that's really concerning about the legislation is that Porter has introduced jail terms for people who underpay wages. Now, there is supposed to be a carve out for where people do it by accident, and I accept that. It's very unlikely that a person who gets underpaid by $5 is going to end up seeing their employer sent to prison. But what's someone's accident is a matter for subjective analysis, and you can see a Labor-appointed judge who decides he wants to throw a book at someone and send someone to prison, like George Calombaris, for example, to prison because of systemic, large-scale underpayments made entirely by accident, because the person's a big target that they want to make an issue out of.
Let's turn to now that something you got really fired up on Facebook, and Peter Dutton has sort of capitulated to this today, is that there's going to be a new parliamentary inquiry into extremism, which is Christina Keneally, the shadow Labor Home Affairs Minister. She was pushing for the joint parliamentary Committee on Security and Intelligence to hold hearings into the threat of right-wing extremism. And she got, interesting today, some ammunition when a joint counter-terrorism operation between New South Wales and federal police arrested an 18-year-old teenager in Albury who described as having extreme right-wing ideology with alleged white supremacists. They'd been monitoring him for a while, and that it's alleged he urged others to commit terrorist acts online and access bomb-making materials, which he sought to provide to others. Now, an 18-year-old wannabe Nazi LARP on the internet is, I would say, not worthy of a inquiry into far-right extremism, whatever that is. But Keneally's been at this for ages.
Well, for her, it's a great diversionary point whenever they need to, in trouble, break glass in case of emergency. And the one they always pull out is right-wing extremism. I got to ask the question though: is how did fascists suddenly become right-wingers? When did that conversion occur in any meaningful objective political test? Nazi stands for National Socialist. They are socialists. They are left-wingers by a different form of. They're not communists, but they're different.
I've heard these types of arguments from conservatives before, and I get where you're coming from an ideological standpoint, but it never really holds up in these sorts of politicized environments.
Well, because the media is very happy to describe neo-Nazis as being the extreme end of the conservative movement, when it's nothing of the sort. It's two sides of the same socialist coin. I have no time whatsoever for fascism any more than I do for communism. It's an abhorrent ideology that completely ignores the fallen nature of man, which is why utopias cannot be achieved, because mankind itself is absolutely, utterly incapable of creating a utopia, and no matter how you structure that system, it can't be done. And effectively, that's all fascism was. It was just communism with a corporate edge to it. That's it. So on one way of defining right wing, which for me means an absolute fundamental belief in free markets and the responsibility of society to eternal moral law, if that is your definition, which is mine, of extreme right wing, well, I'm very happy to be branded as an extreme right winger. I will go down in history arguing I'm the most extreme right winger on the face of the planet, because that's exactly my position. But let's use her definition from here. Let's use a Keneally definition right now that fascism or ultra nationalism is some form of extreme right wing. Okay, can I tell you, I don't think I've ever met anyone in my life who's an extreme right winger under that definition. Have you? I don't know anyone like that. I know a lot of people, and I've certainly come across people who claim to be of the nationalist bent, and I've never met any of them that want to engage in terrorist activities. And when in Australia have we ever had a history of this? You've seen this. I've seen this stuff all my life. I remember ABC programs compared by, who's that communist who used to be on the radio and now he just writes columns and sneers all day on Twitter? Mike Carlton. That's it. Mike
yeah. No, have you got a message from him yet?
No, I haven't been messaged by him. Mike Carlton used to run these programs in the 80s about how ASIO was focused on the communist elements in Australia, when all along it should have been focused on fascists who existed. And the only evidence they could ever cite was that some Croatians once set off a bomb in the Serbian embassy. I'm like, hang on a second, that's not ideological politics. That's ethnic politics. That's got nothing to do with left or right. It just so happens that the Croatians were traditionally, at least the Croatian nationalists happened to be of the sort of more fascist bent. But that was it. I mean, but they don't say anything about the fact that the Hilton bomber walks around the streets of Sydney to this day. In fact, more than that, he's a lecturer at Sydney University and very proud of the fact that he once blew up and killed a garbage man and a police officer. And they give him a job in academia. That's where the terrorism is. It's always been on the left.
Yeah, they would do well, this new extremism committee, to look at communist and Antifa terrorism, or is it what's the terminology they do, potential for violence? Well, if you look at a communist Antifa Twitter, it's full of threats and glorification of violence all the time. But going back to what you were saying, that there's always been national socialist groups in Australia, and they've always been very tiny. What the main one that's around at the moment is the National Socialist Network, which, as far as I can see, all they seem to do is just go to various places in these ninja outfits, do the Nazi salute, might put some stickers on there, and that's about it. But of course, it gets Keneally into a frenzy that this is a sign that the Nazis are on the march.
That sounds like a troll. I mean, I haven't come across these guys. That's the first I've heard of this group. But man, that just sounds like they're trolling someone. Like,
yeah,
someone's having a laugh. That's what it sounds like.
Well, it's designed to provoke and to trigger. They love the attention that they get from all of these leftist rags, and these people such as Keneally love them as well. It seems to be a mutual beneficial relationship. And now, Keneally has also got Peter Dutton to agree to this, because it's also the day after the Christchurch Commission of Inquiry report was released. Well, some of it was released because the ones featuring testimony from New Zealand government ministers is redacted for 30 years, but mentions Brenton Tarrant's online's activities and how he was involved.
How did that guy get branded as a right winger as well? I mean, I've read his manifesto. He was going on about eco-fascism and veganism and all this sort of stuff. How did he turn into? Go on.
And he said he liked Candace Owens as well, that black conservative.
Oh, did he? I didn't realise he liked Candace Owens. Well, yeah, there you go. She is good, by the way. I'm a big fan of Candace Owens, but
oh no.
Well, you don't like her.
No, I'm just saying that. You have that in common.
I see. We're going to turn into Brandon Tarrant, are we? Brenton Tarrant, whatever his name is, because we like Candace Owens. Is that how it works? Is it okay? Guilt by association.
Well, I had the notoriety of being labelled a alt-right extremist by Christina Keneally when George Christensen came on this program a couple of months ago, and she was quoted in the New Daily. That's a union-funded rag, isn't it?
Some union super-funded rag, bastard. So everyone who's stupid enough to put their money into an industry super fund is paying for that website. And
yeah,
and you've got to wonder what are they getting out of it? What is achieved? I mean, as everyone knows, online news doesn't make any money. There's no firewall. So what exactly? How does CBUS or Australian Super go to their members and justify spending millions of dollars a year running a online news source? Anyway, but I digress.
So this is.
You're an alt-right extremist.
Yes, Senator Christina Keneally, Labor's Shadow Home Affairs Minister, slammed Mr. Christensen for appearing in the Unshackled video. Right-wing extremism and white supremacist ideologies attack our values and are a danger to democracies everywhere. These views have no place in our society and no place in the Australian Parliament. Parliamentarians and national leaders can send a strong and clear message about who Australia is as a community and who what we value and what we reject. And she called on Scott Morrison to explain why his government MP appeared on an alt-right podcast and what steps he was putting in place to ensure it never happened again. And George Christensen responded, "You don't catch extremism by being interviewed by somebody who's interviewed people with extreme views." Mr. Christensen does not describe to socialism just because he has been interviewed by the New Daily in the past, who have also interviewed Miss Keneally and other Labor socialists.
Well, that is also true. George could have been a little bit more wholesome in his defence of you as not a person who is an alt-right extreme. Well, whatever that means, by the way. I don't even know.
He at the beginning he did ask me because he was being asked by this Gizmodo journalist Cam Wilson. "Oh, your account likes the Unshackled's Facebook page, and they've interviewed all these different people." And so he did this thing at the beginning where he's like, "Oh, ask me, are you a neo-Nazi? Are you a white supremacist? Do you spread conspiracy theories? Have you worn a funny T-shirt with Pinochet on it?"
Well, I'd happily wear a funny T-shirt with Pinochet on it, but as for the rest of that, yes, I wasn't aware that you would subscribe to any of that stuff. But
no, well, I have. I answered no. Of course, and he wrote that down on this piece of paper to send back to Cam Wilson.
But I mean, this whole guilt by association stuff is just whack anyway. I mean, is anyone accusing Joe Rogan of being some sort of neo-Nazi? He gets all sorts of people on his program of all sorts of descriptions, and that's just what it is. It's an interview show. Anyway, I mean, that's what Keneally does, though. That's her whole shtick. Is she just goes out and complains all day about conservative groups? Remember, CPAC was a grand right-wing nut job love-in.
Because Raheem Kassam said some mean things about Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah, well, which are very deserved, by the way. Sturgeon somehow gets away with everything that she does, and she never cops any abuse over genuine political failings that she has. But let's not digress into the topic of Scottish politics either. But this is what Keneally does. Apparently, they think that somehow brings some value to the Labor parliamentary team. Did you? I presume you saw the Four Corners thing with Keneally and Porter and Alan Tudge and all that. Did you?
Oh yes, where it was a Four Corners episode, which looked more like a new idea spread. The reason why I mentioned New Idea is because they were the publication that brought down Andrew Broad, the former national MP for Mallee, reported that he was on some sugar baby website. So hence why I call it New Idea. But yeah, that was atrocious Four Corners episode. The way that Louise Milligan presented it was like, the Liberal Party is bad because they don't have enough women, and it's bad for women because this is how I interpret these situations.
Oh, but Keneally somehow managed to get herself on a show about Liberal politicians having affairs, not to get on the show to talk about having an affair with a Liberal politician, to say that she once went to the midwinter ball, which is not a Liberal Party event, by the way, went to the midwinter ball at Parliament House, and she had some guy give her an ogling with her eyes, and she felt dirty because people looked at her in sexual ways. I mean, that's your way of getting on TV and saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm still really hot." People want to look at me and want to have lustful thoughts about me. Look at me. That was the most ridiculous insertion in that program, which just showed you that Milligan had literally nothing to provide the program.
Well, she also spoke to Sarah Hanson-Young, who I can't believe had the nerve to talk about their treatment of women in politics after earlier in this year she gave that reference to the wife slapper.
Yeah, but hang on. We've talked about this before. The left made a massive deal about the death of Ted Kennedy. Has anyone ever treated women worse than Ted Kennedy? He had an affair with a staffer, drove her drunk off a bridge, and left her to drown in a car so that he could sleep off his drunkenness so he wouldn't get in trouble for drink driving. He left a woman to die so that he wouldn't get in trouble for drink driving. And they called him the Lion of the Senate, because it doesn't matter what you do, it's about what you believe. That's what matters to the left, and always has.
Let's move on to another development in federal politics, which is that I'm sure you've been following this, Josh Frydenberg has been leading an ACCC review to force Facebook and Google to remunerate mainstream media for the links to their content, which is the most perverse sort of remuneration system I've ever thought. So you're getting traffic from Facebook and Google, like you're actually getting, and whether that leads to advertising revenue or signups and that, and you're demanding money from the people who are driving traffic to your website.
I agree. It's nuts. I think I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. My guess is that the government has been leaned on very heavily by the big media outlets for two reasons. One, they earn royalties from them, from their TV stations and their radio stations. Notably, Google and Facebook don't have TV and radio stations to pay license fees for. And I'd say the second reason is that Google and Facebook don't really publish op-eds, and media outlets do. And politicians magically go soft on media laws when it suits them, because they get promised quietly, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we will go easy on you at the next election. Just give us what we're after. And things like that happen all the time. There's a classic example is the defamation laws that we have now, uniform in Australia since 2005, where they put a cap on damages of $250,000. So anyone can go out right now and accuse you, Tim, on national television of raping goats, and the most you can get in damages is $250,000. Now that sounds like a lot of money to some people, but if you're an extremely high profile Australian who makes a lot of money, that can completely destroy your career. and the most you can get back is $250,000. Why did and it was universally agreed to by both Liberal and Labor politicians in every state and territory in Australia when it was passed. Why? I've never understood it. It was just a media suck job.
Well, Ed, if launching a defamation action would probably cost around $250,000 in lawyer fees. Yeah, and if you follow the recent high-profile defamation cases, particularly, I know it's in the UK, Johnny Depp's defamation case against the Sun newspaper, he came out way worse because of what came out during that trial. I think it was Helen Dale, who's Australian English lawyer, worked for David Linehelm for a bit, who referred to defamation as blood sport. And, well, the Johnny Depp trial showed exactly what comes out.
I'm not a huge fan of Helen, by the way. This is a woman who won an award many years ago pretending to be a Ukrainian.
Yes, I'm aware of her history.
She's never apologized for it. She's never handed the award back. She's never handed the money back that she got for it. So, I've called her out on that on social media in the past, and so she blocked me on social media over it. Whilst she might be correct on this issue, I don't think that someone like that is the most high-minded, principled person when it comes to calling out the truth, regardless of what their political views may be or otherwise, Tim. But nonetheless, I do take the point.
She's a good lawyer, which is why I referred to her legal analysis.
Oh, sure. She's obviously a very intelligent woman. I don't dispute that. Has an interesting, colourful history. I guess we all do to some degree, though, don't we? But she could have dealt with that issue, I think, differently.
But going back to the news media bargaining code, of course, it's only the big media that are going to benefit from it. There's no means for me to get some free money from Facebook and Google.
Oh yeah, so that's all it is. I mean, it's taking money from people who have money and they're giving it to the people who they want to do a favour for. But as the internet has shown us over the years, you can't stop the market. You just can't. It always finds a way to pop itself up somehow. Things will migrate somewhere else. Facebook and Google will deal with it in a different way. Protecting the media industry is the reason why the media industry is in the problem it's got at the moment. It was protected for far too long. The TV station's been limited to 3 stations. Radio being limited to a handful of stations in most capital cities. Newspapers being limited. I remember when Kerry Packer desperately tried to buy Fairfax, and he couldn't because the cross media laws stopped him from owning any more than 15%, unless he sold either Channel 9 or Australian Consolidated Press. Ironically, the Packer family doesn't own any media anymore. But can you imagine the state of Fairfax had Packer been running it? It would be a very different, I would have thought, much more successful media organisation than it ended up being.
Although I think when Kerry Packer died, Jamie was always going to go into the casino business. So that alternate history might have been a bit different. But this reminds me, we were talking about Christina Keneally's extreme right-wing derangement syndrome. We also have Rudd with his Murdoch derangement syndrome, making a post or video every day trying to get his Murdoch royal commission up. I think he sleeps when he's asleep at night. He's crying out his sleep, Murdoch. Like, he just thinks about them all the time.
They're completely obsessed. And I don't understand why no one ever says 2007, the News Limited publications were completely 100% locked in behind Kevin Rudd. No one remembers that at all.
Oh, they've brought it up again recently, and also how Rudd sucked up to all the editors at the time. Yeah.
But he goes on and on about these guys determine elections, and but that's Kevin Rudd. The guy's never done anything wrong in his life, in his mind. He's never been responsible for anything. that's gone wrong. It's always been everyone else was jealous. Everyone else didn't recognise how great he was and still is. I don't know if you read did you read in Turnbull's book about Rudd trying to get the position of the UN Secretary General? Have you read that?
I don't remember that bit. Refresh me and my audience.
So he rings Turnbull, according to Turnbull, but I've heard this story from other people, so I think it's correct as much as you can believe what you think of what Malcolm has to say about anything. So he rings up Turnbull when Turnbull was Prime Minister, and he said, "I want to run for Secretary General," and Malcolm takes it to cabinet. And there was a couple in cabinet who wanted to push him just as a way of like getting rid of him, right? I think Julie Bishop was on the let's nominate him. We look magnanimous, it keeps him busy, type of thing. And then there was others in cabinet who apparently said, no, we can't back this guy. We'll look like idiots. We'll look like idiots not just in Australia but on the world stage. And then heaven forbid, what if he actually wins? It would be a disaster. The UN would be a complete disaster, and we get blamed for it. So ultimately, Cabinet decides, according to Turnbull, that they're not going to support Kevin Rudd's nomination. So Kevin Rudd goes, well, someone has to nominate me. So he rings the president of Botswana, and he spends months lobbying the president of Botswana to nominate him. And apparently he tells the president of Botswana that Australia is backing him. And then Malcolm had to have this awkward telephone call where the president of Botswana rings him and says, I understand you're supporting Rudd for Secretary General. And Malcolm has to say, no, that's not the case. They hang up, and 5 minutes later, Rudd rings Turnbull in a rage, and he's going, you guys are effing effed me, and I can't believe you would do this. And he's, screaming down the phone. And when I win, I'm going to get you guys, and it's all, yeah. And so unsurprisingly, I think in the end, no one nominated him. He couldn't get a single country to nominate him, or if he might have got one or something like that. It just went nowhere, as you would expect with Kevin Rudd. A legend in his own lunchtime.
I know that the Morrison government, well, it's been revealed they're throwing huge resources to try and get Matthias Cormann, former finance minister, the gig as head of the OECD. And I'm not sure if you saw that PR shot that he did where he showed him cooking a barbecue, except the barbecue wasn't on.
No, I didn't see that. Oh, classic.
Yeah, this is the problem with the social media age, is photo ops like that are forensically analysed. Now, hang on. I remember there was another doozy during the Benelog by-election where John Alexander was against Christina Keneally, another election that she lost, where he and his volunteers, they posed phoning constituents with the phones not plugged in.
That's right. There's thousands of these things that happen over the years. So they're always quite amusing for 5 minutes. It's just, I guess, it's how you respond to them as a candidate that tests whether they become long-term remembered gaffes in the James Diaz style of can you what was the James Diaz what's the 10-point plan to stop the boats, and he had absolutely no idea. But that one sort of took off because he didn't know how to respond to it.
Yeah. Well, the rule in politics is you never mention that there's so many points in a plan or something, because then you've got to list them all. Because that was also what Rick Perry got into trouble, saying the 3 agencies I want to get rid of in the 2012, and he could only
do it, wasn't it? Was
yeah. So never mention I've got this many points. Don't do it. Yeah.
Well, I'll never be a political candidate for office, so fortunately I won't have to worry too much about that. But for everyone watching, there's a tip for you.
Now let's turn to your home state of New South Wales now. I mentioned that the New South Wales government's got the gold star. I'm not going to call it the gold standard, but the gold star for being the least worst when it comes to coronavirus restrictions. And it's had the effect of making Glasberejiklian basically Teflon politically invincible. When we last spoke, it's when it first came out about secret boyfriend, Daryl Maguire.
He wasn't, but yeah, I get it. Look, she's not out in the woods on that yet. ICAC's yet to hand down its final report into the Maguire investigation, and I don't know what they're going to do, but there's been plenty of Liberal premiers have fallen on their swords in New South Wales because of ICAC findings against them, however fair or unfair. Let's be fair. Nick Greiner didn't really do anything wrong in appointing Terry Metherell to the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, and that's what caused him to lose his job. And Barry O'Farrell didn't really do anything wrong by accepting a $900 bottle of wine from a donor.
He just forgot that he got it.
I don't know how that causes you to have to resign as premier. I think he was just tired of it, to be honest with you. Because he's never spent a second in politics subsequent to that. So he's not like one of those bad smells hanging around trying to, be a ghost in the way that Rudd or Turnbull have. He couldn't wait to get away from it. But anyway, leave that aside. ICAC has always had a habit of bringing down Liberal governments because it's filled with Labor appointees and Labor lawyers who are out to do what they can for the cause. And I honestly wouldn't be that surprised if they hand down some decision saying that Gladys engaged in corrupt conduct. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily fair on her, but I honestly don't think she's out of the woods on that yet, Tim.
But it sounds like because her team is 100% behind her, it seems like the attitude 100%. Is we're not going to. Well, her cabinet, I'm saying. I know that there's that group of backbenchers who don't like her, but it seems the mindset is like we're not going to let ICAC get another one of our premiers. I think that's sort of the mindset.
Yeah, but and I think to a degree that's correct as well. That the public, she spun it well enough that the public don't really think that there's anything untoward about what happened. And so she'll probably. I think you're right. I think she will survive it, but I'm just saying I don't think she's completely, out of the woods, so to speak. Anyway, we talked about that last time,
well, she's had more slip-ups, shall we say, recently. There was that parliamentary inquiry into that community grants, 140 million before the election, and her office, after they approved them, shredded the documents and deleted the emails. I don't think that sort of destruction works anymore, given that there's always a digital footprint. But again, she's tried to do the PR saying, well, yes, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't pork barreling, but that's how the way it is in politics. They're trying to be upfront. That's her strategy.
But hang on a second. They all do it.
Yeah, I know. Which was her argument, it seemed.
Well, what they mainly do now in almost all jurisdictions and all parties is what you do is you put in the hands of bureaucrats to hand out the money. And that way you can't be accused of the Ros Kelly style of, we've got everyone here on a whiteboard and I'm making the personal decisions on who gets the money. It's just some bureaucrat that's got nothing to do with me. I can't be accused of having funneled the money in a particular direction.
They had not the whiteboard, but the spreadsheets in the federal sports rights scandal, which obviously Bridget McKenzie, she resigned on a technicality, but this seems to be, I think centre-right governments have learned if there's this sort of scandal, just write it out, because we're sick of losing ministers for these types of scandals, and it's not fair because the Labor side always gets away with a lot of scandals.
Yeah, because they're held to a different standard. It's this whole what's in the public interest. We're back to what we were talking about at the start with Four Corners, right? but their argument was, oh, it was in the public interest to talk about alleged affairs. By the way, there was no evidence of Porter ever having an affair too, by the way. No, I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah. All parties denied it. And the stuff from his uni days, like that was just gratuitous. And yeah, like young uni students get quite drunk on pub crawls and booze cruises and that hold the front page.
Yeah, he vomited when he was 19 once after having too many beers. Yeah, but you know, that as I was saying though, is the argument that they devoted an hour to a program about alleged affairs involving two Liberal MPs was because, well, they're on the Conservative side of politics and therefore they're hypocrites. That was the whole argument for why that's in the public interest. But Tony Burke leaving his wife to have an affair with his staffer who's now living with, that's not in the public interest because, well, Tony Burke's on the Labor side of politics, even though he claims to be a traditional Roman Catholic. But
yeah, and he was also against same-sex marriage for quite a while.
But he actually then voted against it. There was not one single Labor MP in the lower house, I believe, who voted against same-sex marriage or abstained on it. I think there were a couple of Labor senators who did vote against it.
Anthony Byrne, he abstained.
Okay.
He was always a no.
Okay, but he abstained. Same with Tony Abbott. So against it that they abstained.
Yes. Well, there was 4 in the end who voted against in the lower house. I know that because, well, that's what is it? The 3-year anniversary of the vote passing.
Oh, was that today?
Oh well, it's around about. I think may have been yesterday on that.
I didn't know that. There you have it. Well, thank you, Tony Abbott, for giving that to us. It wasn't required. He didn't need to do it. There was no need for a plebiscite. It should have just simply been a party room vote. No, and we now have same-sex marriage because Tony Abbott. Anyway, you've now got me back on my topic of how much I dislike Tony Abbott again, Tim.
Although Malcolm Turnbull would claim ultimate credit for passing it.
Turnbull will claim that he invented the internet.
He also founded the Guardian. He basically
that's
claims.
Right. He did claim that too. I forgot about that. Yes, that's true.
Which Christina Keneally writes op-eds for.
Hey, by the way, just back on the topic of Turnbull, again, I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book. I didn't have to pay for it because I was one of the lucky recipients of the leaked PDF.
Turnbull's, lawyers and the police are going to come after you now that you've confessed that on the live stream. Watch out.
And the guy, it's amazing. There's a story he tells. Probably the most fascinating stuff there is not his time in politics; it was his time in business. And there's a story he tells about when he was trying to piece together some deal with Kerry Packer in the early '90s, and he openly describes how he turned Packer into the ATO secretly because Packer wouldn't give him a board seat on this company that they took over together. And it's like, what a rat. Why would you stabbed the bloke in the back because you didn't get your way? He still got every cent that he wanted from the deal. He just didn't get a board seat. Who does that? This is the sort of person he is. But anyway,
going back to Gladys, she was also caught in that double standard when it comes to the coronavirus. She took a test and didn't self-isolate. In fact, voted in Parliament while she was waiting for the results. And of course, her argument was, "Oh, well, I didn't really need to take the test anyway. I just did it out of caution."
Well, politicians and coronavirus double standards, hey? Gavin Newsom going and having dinner with health officials too, by the way. Health officials in breach of coronavirus rules. Brothels are open, but you can't go to church. You go and slobber all over a bunch of grapes in the supermarket, but heaven forbid you go to a gym. I guess that's all. We're back on the topic of none of these laws ever made any sense.
There was quite a witty tweet about this matter from Kate Washington, who's the Labor member for Port Stephens. Did this fictional exchange where the COVID testing nurse says to Gladys, "Now you need to self-isolate after getting a test," and her response was, "I don't need to know about that bit."
Yeah, that's right. Just that comes from the calls with
Yes.
with Daryl Maguire, where he's telling her about how he's getting he's going to get a $500,000 cut if the airport gets approved, and she's going, "Oh, I don't need to know about that." So that somehow waives one's moral responsibility.
It's sort of the 21st century Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing. I see nothing. Just say, "No, I don't need to know about that. Those bits."
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think Brett Sutton, our chief health officer, used the excuse that he wasn't aware of private security being used, even though he CC'd in the email saying, "Oh, I was CC'd into lots of emails. I didn't, see all of them."
Yeah, how's that guy still in a job? Well, I know why, because he's covering for Dan.
And also he's got the dreamy eyes that all of the Victorian women love. Like you can apparently get a Christmas gift like a pillow cushion with Brett Sutton's face on it.
Really? I never realised he was a sex bomb. I'm not a gay man, so it's a bit hard for me to judge what a good-looking man looks like. But I've honestly never heard anyone tell me that Brett Sutton was a dreamboat.
Well, that's because you've been thankfully out of the coronavirus hell that we were in Victoria, where our daily press. Daily press briefings from the purple wall of doom with Dan and Brett. There was this hilarious, I still can't find it, hilarious, or it was an edit that somebody did of the Groundhog Day scenes when Phil Connors wakes up like 10 days in a row with Sonny and Cher playing, but it replaces Sonny and Cher with Dan Andrews' press briefing announcing the new coronavirus cases. And then, of course, Phil Connors smashes the clock radio and decking.
That's a good one. Yeah, I missed all the obviously most of the Victorian press conferences. We weren't watching all that stuff. I mean, unless you were glued to Sky News all day, which those of us who
work. Our lives depended on what he said every day. That's why we were tuning in.
Oh no, I totally understand. You guys, you weren't allowed to leave the home. What else were you doing except watching Daniel Andrews' press conferences? I know. Geez. Well, who knows? Maybe we'll end up going back into this again.
Well, who knows what the autumn of 2021 will be, or whether we'll have the smorgasbord of vaccines to choose from, because, well, there's at least, I think, 5 vaccines that are on the verge of being approved at the moment, and then there could be a whole heap more. But we won't get into the vaccines tonight. But Dan has promised us that we can go back to normal when there's a vaccine. That we'll only have these coronavirus restrictions, COVID normal, until there's a vaccine. But hey, he broke his promise before.
Well, what if no one takes the vaccine?
Oh, there's still plenty of sheep in Australia who'll be just hook it to my veins.
You're right. You're absolutely 100% correct. I can see millions of people lining up to get it as soon as they possibly can. I accept that, but there's going to be. I mean, there's no way in the world you get me to take it. I don't give a stuff what the consequences of that is. There's no way in the world I'm taking it. Not because I think that I'm going to grow a third arm or anything like that. It is a completely unnecessary vaccine for a healthy person under the age of 70 to take. So why would you do that? and I hate being told what to do for no good reason. So I'm digging my heels in even deeper on that topic. But I got a friend who who took the swine flu vaccine about 5 years ago during all the panic around that when that was going around, and he developed narcolepsy from it. I mean, I accept too that those side effects are rare, but why would you put yourself at that sort of risk for something that's not going to hurt you? Flu vaccines, when that's what this is, it's a flu vaccine. Flu vaccines for anyone under the age of 70, it's just a pointless exercise.
Well, people still get them every winter, but the vaccines is a whole nother issue. I said earlier on that perhaps Sky News COVID-19 channel will turn into the watching people get the coronavirus vaccine channel, since we've seen the shows from the UK with the first COVID vaccine administrations, and we have our politicians here saying to basically silence the anti-vaxxers. Yeah, we'll all get the vaccine for the cameras, so you can watch Greg Hunt and Scott Morrison on the Sky News Extra channel get all the vaccines.
I'm sure they will. They'll make a big deal out of it. Yeah, no doubt about it whatsoever. Well, we're going to be paying the price for this for a very, very long time. And it's not just the economic price. There's a social price, there's a political price. We have voluntarily given up so many freedoms in the name of public safety, and the government will run with that a million miles for forever hereafter. You get any strain of anything well, we need to save people. Where's the limitation? How many people have to die before it gets to a point where, we have to save people? Anyway.
Yep, it's the great unknown, but at least we've got this nice Australian summer period, which I'm enjoying, and I hope you enjoy as well. I've appreciated you coming on again, Kyle, because as I've said, you've always got plenty to say, and you say it well and strongly.
Well, mate, it's always a pleasure coming on your show, and thank you for inviting me back.
And we may get to see each other in person soon, now that the borders are open. I was in New South Wales, not last weekend, but the weekend before. I was able to escape the cultural, we call it cultural maskism now in Victoria.
Where did you go to? Did you go to Sydney?
Albury. Went to Albury.
Oh, Albury! Wow, you ventured deep into enemy territory there, didn't you?
Hey, it's still Dan free environment up there. His rules can't get to me there.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Nice place, Albury. I've been there once or twice. Yeah. Yeah. Nicer than Wodonga.
Oh well, Wodonga, they still had the cultural masking, and it was 40 degrees when I was up there.
That was that weekend, that crazy hot weekend that hit very early. Yeah. That was very unpleasant. Anyway. Weather. Let's not turn this show into a discussion of weather.
Well, I was saying to my audience before, so far so good with hardly any bushfires.
Oh, as soon as Scott Morrison goes to Hawaii, no doubt they'll start all over again, because he was at fault for that, as we all know.
Yeah, but he can't. Well, he can leave the country. He can exempt himself, but then he's got to quarantine at the lodge at his desk, where he's got the suit above and the shorts underneath, as we saw.
Yeah, the newsreader. Yeah.
That's a photo op that actually worked out pretty well. There was no errors in it.
Oh yeah, the TV was actually turned on, plugged in.
Yes. Anyway, take care, Kyle.
Thanks, mate. Have a good night.
All right, and that's the show for tonight. I was scheduled to have on tonight James Goddard, British patriot activist, but that's been postponed. So let you know when that is going to happen. It could be tomorrow night, or it could be later on. But James is certainly keen to get on the show. He runs his own YouTube channel, is also a contributor to Patriotic Talk, and also now a contributor to Patriotic Alternative. That's all from me for tonight. Next time you'll definitely see me is tomorrow night, Uncockables 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, on the show YouTube and D-Live channel, and then Trad Tasman Talk 6 p.m. Fridays on the Unshackled YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching tonight, and I'll see you next show, and I'll see you tomorrow night for the Uncockables.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting the unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.